"You've destroyed us!" my father roared, casting me out for my pregnancy, ignoring my truth. I walked away with a bitter smile. 15 years later, when they came to meet me and my son, their faces drained of color, stunned by the life they'd shun. I was 17 when my world caught fire. Not the kind of fire you see on the news, with flames licking up walls and sirens screaming through the night, but the kind that burns inside, silent and merciless, reducing everything you thought you knew to ash. It started with a scream, my father's voice, raw and jagged, slicing through the quiet of our Seattle craftsman home. "You've ruined us, Emily," he bellowed, his face twisted with a rage I'd never seen, not even when he preached about sin from his pulpit at Grace Covenant Church. His words weren't just angry, they were a verdict, a condemnation that branded me as the daughter who'd betrayed everything he stood for. I stood frozen in our dining room, the chandelier casting harsh shadows across his trembling fists, my mother's silent tears, and my brother's accusing stare, all because of a single plastic stick with 2 pink lines, hidden in my bathroom drawer, now lying on the table like a loaded gun. I'm Emily Harper, 34 now, but back then, I was just a girl with dreams bigger than the Puget Sound. Dreams tied to a boy named Liam Carter and a future we swore we'd build together. That night, though, as my father's voice echoed off the oak-paneled walls, I wasn't a dreamer anymore. I was a scandal, a stain on the perfect tapestry of our family's life, a life that looked flawless from the outside, with its white-trimmed windows, Sunday potlucks, and my father's booming sermons that drew hundreds to our church every week. But perfection is a lie, and I was about to learn just how fragile it could be. Let me take you back to where it all began, to a time when I still believed in the safety of my world. Seattle's suburbs in the late 2000s were a postcard of American dreams. Sprawling lawns, coffee shops buzzing with tech workers, and the distant hum of ferries crossing to Bainbridge Island. My father, Pastor David Harper, was a local legend, not just for his fiery sermons, but for his real estate empire, Harper Properties, which turned empty lots into gleaming subdivisions. He was the man who could quote Corinthians and close $1 million deal in the same breath. My mother, Susan, was his perfect counterpart. Her quilts won ribbons at the King County Fair, and her volunteer work at the church's soup kitchen made her the saint of our community. Then there was Nathan, my older brother by 2 years, the golden boy with a lacrosse scholarship and a valedictorian speech that left our high school auditorium in tears. We were the Harpers, Seattle's shining example of faith, family, and success. At least, that's what everyone thought. I was 16 when the first crack appeared in that perfect facade. It was a rainy October evening, the kind where the Pacific Northwest sky seems to weep endlessly. I'd stayed late at a church youth group event, helping stack chairs after a worship night. The parking lot was empty, the streetlights flickering in the drizzle, when a man in a hooded jacket stepped out from behind a van. "Give me your bag," he growled, his voice low and rough, a knife glinting in his hand. My heart slammed against my ribs as I fumbled with my backpack, my phone and $20 inside. I threw it at his feet, praying he'd take it and leave. He lunged closer, the blade inches from my face, when a car's headlight swung into the lot, startling him. He grabbed the bag and bolted into the shadows. I stood there, shaking, the rain soaking through my sweater, realizing for the first time that the world wasn't as safe as my father's sermons promised. I didn't tell my parents. They'd have blamed me for walking alone, and I couldn't bear another lecture about God's protection when I'd just felt so unprotected. That incident lingered like a bruise, but life moved on. I was a junior at Lakeside High, a good student with dreams of becoming a nurse, inspired by the hospital dramas I binged on TV. I wasn't the star like Nathan, but I had my own quiet light, good grades, a knack for writing, and a love for music that came alive when I sang in the church choir. Then, in senior year, I met Liam Carter. It was English class, and our teacher paired us for a project on The Great Gatsby. I'd expected another jock or debate club kid, but Liam was different. He had these green eyes that seemed to see straight through the high school hierarchy, a mop of dark hair that fell over his forehead, and a quiet intensity that made my stomach flip. He played guitar in a local indie band, not for fame, but because music was his oxygen. "Gatsby's a fool for love," he said that first day, leaning back in the library chair, his voice soft but sure. "That I get why he chased it. Don't you?" We spent hours talking, not just about the book, but about everything, our dreams, our fears, the way the Seattle skyline looked at dusk. Liam wasn't like the other boys obsessed with prom or sports. He volunteered at a homeless shelter, wrote songs that could break your heart, and had this way of making me feel seen, like I was more than Pastor Harper's daughter. We fell in love, slowly, deliberately, the way you do when you're young but know it's real. Our first kiss was under the Space Needle during a rare sunny afternoon, the city sparkling below us. We planned our futures. He'd study music at Berkeley, I'd go to Seattle University for nursing, and we'd meet up in Boston or Seattle, maybe share a tiny apartment with mismatched furniture. My parents liked Liam. He was polite, came from a solid Episcopalian family, and even joined us for Sunday brunch. "That boy's got a good head on his shoulders," Dad would say, clapping Liam on the back. I thought we were untouchable. Then came the summer after graduation, when everything shattered. Liam started feeling off-tired all the time, bruises blooming on his arms like dark flowers. He brushed it off as stress from college applications, but I saw the worry in his eyes. One humid July day, he called me from the hospital. It's bad," he said, his voice trembling. The diagnosis was non-Hodgkin lymphoma, aggressive and advanced. The doctor's words were a blur. Chemotherapy, survival rates, bone marrow transplants. I sat in his hospital room, holding his hand, watching the boy who'd played guitar under the stars turn pale and fragile. "I'm not scared of dying," he whispered one night, his voice hoarse from chemo. "I'm scared of leaving nothing behind, of being forgotten." His words carved themselves into my heart, a promise I didn't yet understand. That fall, while Liam fought for his life, I faced my own battles. One night, leaving the hospital after a long visit, I was mugged in the parking lot. A man grabbed me from behind, his knife cold against my throat, demanding my phone and wallet. I froze, the memory of the carjacking flooding back. He yanked my bag, slicing my arm shallowly before running off. I stumbled back to the hospital, blood seeping through my sleeve, too shaken to cry. The nurses patched me up, but the incident left me jumpy, always looking over my shoulder. I didn't tell Liam, he had enough to carry, but it made me cling to him harder, desperate to hold on to the one person who made me feel safe. By winter, Liam's condition was a roller coaster. Some days he'd be strong enough to joke about hospital food, others he could barely lift his head. During one clear moment, between chemo cycles, he looked at me with those green eyes and said, "I want to leave something of me in this world, Em, something that's us." We talked for hours about what he meant. A child, a piece of him that could live on if he didn't. It wasn't impulsive or reckless. It was a choice born from love, from staring down death and wanting to defy it. We were careful, raised in faith, but this felt bigger than rules. It felt like a promise to keep him alive. 2 months later, I stared at a positive pregnancy test, my heart a mess of joy and terror. Joy because this was Liam's legacy, our love made real. Terror because I knew what my family would think. My father's sermons on purity, my mother's whispers about those girls who got pregnant out of wedlock, they haunted me. I planned to tell them with Liam once he was stronger, once we could face them together, but life doesn't wait for plans. One night my phone rang. Grace, Liam's mom, her voice breaking. "He's in the ICU, Emily. He collapsed. You need to come now." I raced to the hospital, my heart pounding louder than the rain against my windshield. But as I reached Liam's floor, alarms blared and nurses shouted about a fire in the east wing. Smoke curled through the hallways, thick and choking. I pushed through, coughing, my eyes burning, until a firefighter grabbed me, pulling me toward an exit. "You can't go up there," he yelled, but I fought him, screaming Liam's name. They got the fire under control and I made it to his room, but the panic clung to me, a new layer of fear. Liam was unconscious, tubes snaking from his arms, his breathing shallow. I sat by his bed, whispering promises to our baby, praying he'd wake up. The next blow came at home. My mother, always too good at cleaning, found the pregnancy test I'd hidden in my bathroom drawer, wrapped in tissue like a secret I could bury. I came home from the hospital to find her and Dad at the dining room table, the test between them like evidence in a courtroom. Nathan stood in the corner, arms crossed, his face a mask of disappointment. "Sit down, Emily," Dad said, his voice low and dangerous, the calm before a storm. I sat, my hands shaking, trying to find the words to explain. Before I could, he exploded. "You've ruined us. Everything we've built, everything this family stands for, gone because of your sin." His fist slammed the table, making the chandelier sway. I tried to speak, to tell them about Liam's cancer, about our love, but he cut me off. "No excuses. You fix this, or you're out of this house." I looked to Mom, hoping for the woman who'd braided my hair and sung me to sleep, but she just stared at the table, tears dripping onto her lap. Nathan stepped forward, his voice cold. "How could you do this to us, Em? To Dad's church, to his business? You're so selfish." His words stung worse than Dad's, because Nathan had been my hero once, the brother who'd taught me to ride a bike. Now he looked at me like I was a stranger. "Liam's dying," I said, my voice breaking. "This baby is his last wish, his legacy. Please, just listen." But Dad stood, towering over me. "You have two choices. End this disgrace, or you're no longer a Harper. Get out." I ran to my room, sobbing, and called Grace. She and Michael didn't hesitate. "Come to us," she said. "You're family." I packed a bag, my hands trembling, and went back to the hospital. Liam was awake, barely, his skin like paper. "They found out," I told him, clutching his hand. "They're kicking me out." A tear slipped down his cheek. "I'm so sorry, Em. This is my fault." I shook my head, fierce. "No, this is ours. For love." He reached under his pillow, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside was an emerald ring, his mother's, its green stone catching the hospital light. "I wanted to do this right," he whispered. "I love you, Emily Harper. Always." I slipped it onto my finger, my heart breaking and swelling at once. The next morning I returned home to grab more things, hoping to avoid another fight. But Dad was waiting in the living room, his face like stone. "So you've chosen," he said. Not a question. "You're choosing your reputation over your daughter," I shot back, my voice steadier than I felt. Nathan appeared, holding my phone. "I went through your messages," he said, his tone dripping with judgment. "No texts about Liam's cancer. You're lying." My stomach dropped. "We talk in person, Nathan, at the hospital. How dare you?" But Dad backed him up. "We're protecting this family from your lies." I pushed past them, grabbing my clothes, my mother's voice stopping me at the stairs. "Emily, please," she whispered. "Think about your future." I turned, hoping for a lifeline, but she added, "You're throwing it away." I walked out, Dad's final words echoing, "You're no longer my daughter." I was 19, pregnant and alone, the Seattle rain my only companion. The weeks that followed were a blur of survival. Grace and Michael let me stay in their guest suite, but their home was heavy with Liam's illness, medical bills piling up like a second cancer. I couldn't burden them forever. I found a job at a 24-hour diner, the Night Owl, slinging coffee and burgers for truckers and insomniacs. The manager, a chain-smoking woman named Barb, hired me after I broke down in her office, promising not to cause trouble. I also worked nights at a gas station, the fluorescent lights buzzing as I stocked shelves. Between shifts, I'd visit Liam, watching him fade, his once strong hands too weak to hold mine. Some days he didn't recognize me. Others he'd talk about our baby, naming him Noah after the ark that survived the flood. Then came the night I almost lost everything. I was walking to my car after a diner shift, the parking lot dark and empty. A shadow moved behind me, too close, too fast. It was Jake, an ex-classmate who'd always been too intense, too fixated on me. He'd been sending creepy texts for weeks, blaming me for ruining Liam, claiming I'd stolen him. "You think you can just move on?" he hissed, grabbing my arm, screamed, kicking him, and ran to my car, locking the doors as he pounded on the window. I drove to the police, shaking, and filed a restraining order, but the fear lingered, making every shadow a threat. Liam's final days were a quiet agony. I was at the diner when Grace called, her voice barely holding together. "He's not going to make it through the night." I sped to the hospital, the rain so heavy my wipers couldn't keep up. Liam was barely conscious, his breathing a faint rattle. I held his hand, guiding it to my belly where Noah kicked. A faint smile crossed his lips. "Strong," he murmured. "Like you." We stayed like that, his hand on my stomach, mine over his, until just after midnight, when he looked at me with sudden clarity. "Tell Noah about me," he said, each word a fight. "About us." I promised, tears choking me. He was gone by dawn, leaving me with his ring, our baby, and a hole in my heart that felt like it would never heal. The funeral was a haze. I stood apart, my pregnancy now visible, drawing whispers from old classmates. Grace and Michael held me close, but my family was absent, their pew empty in the church where Dad preached. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from the hospital. Liam had listed me as his fiancée in a cancer trial, entitling me to $4,000, 0 cents in compensation. It was a lifeline, but not enough. Noah arrived 6 weeks early after 28 hours of labor, a tiny fighter at 4 pounds 9 ounces. Grace and Michael were there, snapping photos, but soon after they broke the news. They were moving to Colorado for a job to cover Liam's medical debts. "We'll send money when we can," Grace promised, holding Noah tightly. I was alone again, just me and my son. Postpartum depression hit like a tidal wave. Noah's cries pierced my soul, and some days I could barely get off the couch. Rachel, my coworker at the diner, saw me crumbling and offered her garage apartment. One mom to another, she said, her own daughter Lily tugging at her leg. It was cramped, but it was home. Then came the first lawsuit. A customer claimed I'd caused a food poisoning incident, a lie that threatened my job. Barb fought for me, but the stress was crushing. Then Noah's hospital bills arrived. $50,000, 0 cents for his premature birth. Collectors called daily, their threats like knives in my chest. Desperate, I sent my parents a photo of Noah, his green eyes so like Liam's, with a note, "Your grandson, Noah Liam Harper, born January 8th. Silence. I drove to their house one Sunday, Noah in my arms, hoping for a miracle. Dad answered, his face older but harder. "We have nothing to say," he said, not even glancing at Noah before shutting the door. I saw Mom's shadow in the window, but she didn't come out. Nathan pulled into the driveway, our eyes meeting. I stepped toward him, but he walked past, his silence louder than any words. Everything unraveled at once. Rachel's landlord found out I was living there and threatened to evict us both. Noah spiked 104-degree fever, his tiny body limp. I rushed him to the ER, but halfway there my car was repossessed, towed right from a gas station, leaving me stranded with a sick baby. I called Rachel, who drove us to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed a severe respiratory infection. Another day, and it could have been fatal, they said. I sobbed, holding Noah, feeling like the world was conspiring to break me. Then, a miracle. Elena Martinez, my old Spanish teacher, spotted me outside the hospital, waiting for a bus in the rain. "Emily, what's happened?" she asked, her eyes kind but sharp. I spilled everything: Liam's death, my family's rejection, Noah's illness. She didn't hesitate. "You're coming to my place," she said, driving us to her cozy bungalow. Her attic apartment became our sanctuary, a place to breathe. Elena pushed me to dream again, helping me apply for online nursing courses and watching Noah while I worked. But the pressure didn't stop. At the diner, a coworker spread rumors about my scandalous pregnancy, turning shifts into a gauntlet of glares. Then my bank account was hacked, my savings drained by a scammer who'd gotten my details from a stolen wallet. I nearly dropped out of school, unable to pay tuition, but Elena co-signed a loan, refusing to let me quit. "You're stronger than this," she said, her voice a lifeline. A year later, a letter arrived from a law firm. Liam's cancer trial had led to a breakthrough drug, and as his fiancée, I received $30,000 0 cents from his life insurance, plus a trust fund for Noah's education. It was a gift from Liam, even in death. I finished nursing school, graduating top of my class, and landed a job at Seattle Children's Hospital. I bought a small condo, a victory over the nights I'd slept in my car. Noah thrived, his musical talent blooming as he strummed Liam's old guitar at age 4. Years later, a $5 million 0 cent settlement from the drug company changed everything. I founded the Liam Carter Hope Foundation, building a housing complex for families of kids with cancer. The opening made local news, and 3 days later Nathan emailed me. "I saw you on TV," he wrote. "Mom and Dad saw it too. Dad's had a heart attack. They want to meet Noah." I stared at the words, torn between anger and a flicker of hope. Why now? What had changed? And what secret was Mom hiding in the scrapbook Nathan mentioned? I agreed to a reunion, but with rules. The day they arrived, I watched from my window as they stepped out of their car, Dad leaning on a cane, Mom's hair gray, Nathan nervous. Noah, now 13, looked so much like Liam it stopped them cold. "Is that?" Dad started, staring at a photo of Liam on my wall. "Noah's father," I said. As Noah played a haunting guitar melody he'd written, I told them everything. Liam's cancer, our choice, their betrayal. Dad's face crumpled, Mom sobbed, and Nathan admitted he'd searched my phone, desperate to prove I was lying. "We were wrong," Dad whispered. "We lost you." What did Mom's scrapbook hold? Why had Dad's heart attack changed him? And what would Noah, so wise beyond his years, make of this family he'd never known? I didn't have all the answers, but as I touched the emerald ring around my neck, I knew one thing: Liam's love and Noah's strength had carried me through. And maybe, just maybe, there was room for healing, even after all this time. The rain never stops in Seattle. Not really. It's a constant. Like grief, soaking into your bones until you forget what dry feels like. At 19, I was drowning in both. Liam was gone, his emerald ring heavy on my finger, and Noah, our unborn son, was the only anchor keeping me from sinking completely. My father's words, "You're dead to this family," echoed in my head as I curled up in the back seat of my beat-up Toyota, parked behind a community center in a forgotten corner of the city, the windows fogged with my breath, the world outside a blur of streetlights and shadows. I was pregnant, homeless, and so alone it felt like my heart was caving in. But I wasn't just fighting for me anymore. Noah deserved better than this, better than a mother who'd been cast out like trash. So I clung to Liam's promise, whispered in that sterile hospital room, "Tell our baby about me." I would. I had to. That first night in my car was a test of everything I was made of. The community center's lights flickered off at midnight, leaving me in darkness broken only by the occasional sweep of headlights. I'd scrounged a blanket from a thrift store, but it did little against the February chill. My stomach growled, a reminder of the half-eaten burger I'd saved from my last diner shift. I pressed a hand to my belly, barely rounded but already a universe of its own. "We're gonna make it, Noah," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I don't know how, but we will." Sleep came in fits, interrupted by nightmares of Liam's last breath and my father's slamming door. By morning, my neck ached and my eyes were swollen, but I dragged myself to the center's public restroom to splash water on my face and brush my teeth with a toothbrush I kept in a Ziploc bag. Survival was ugly, but it was mine. The days blurred into a grind of desperation. I'd landed a job at the Night Owl, a 24-hour diner off I-5 where the coffee was burnt and the customers were rough. Barb, the manager, had hired me out of pity after I'd sobbed through my interview, promising to show up on time and work hard. I wore an apron that strained over my growing belly, pouring coffee for truckers and night owls, my feet swelling in cheap sneakers. The tips were meager, but they kept me in gas and food. Nights I worked at a gas station, stocking shelves and dodging drunks who lingered too long by the beer cooler. Between shifts, I'd nap in my car, waking to the sound of rain or the occasional cop tapping my window, telling me to move along. I was invisible, a ghost in my own city, but I kept going because Noah's tiny kicks reminded me I had a reason to. Then came the storm that nearly broke me. It was late March, and Seattle was under siege from a freak Pacific squall. The news warned of flash floods, but I had nowhere to go. I parked in a lot near the diner, thinking it was high enough to be safe. The rain came in sheets, hammering the roof of my car, the wind rocking it like a cradle gone mad. I was half asleep when water started seeping under the doors, cold and relentless. My clothes, my few belongings, photos of Liam, a journal I'd kept, were in the trunk, and I realized with a jolt they'd be ruined. I climbed into the front seat, fumbling for the keys, but the engine sputtered and died. The water rose, lapping at my ankles, then my calves. Panic clawed at my chest. I pounded on the window, screaming for help, but the lot was empty, the world erased by rain. I thought of Noah, trapped with me in this metal coffin, and something primal kicked in. I kicked the door open, fighting the current, and waded to higher ground, soaked and shivering, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. My car was half submerged by morning, my belongings lost, but I was alive. Noah was alive. That was enough. I don't know how I kept going after that. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was Liam's voice in my head, telling me to fight. Grace and Michael, Liam's parents, were my only lifeline. They'd let me stay in their guest suite when I first left home, but their house was a shrine to Liam's absence. His guitar still in the corner, his medical bills stacked on the kitchen table. They treated me like a daughter, bringing me soup when I was too tired to eat, but I saw the strain in their eyes. They were drowning in debt and grief, and I couldn't add to their burden. So I moved to my car, promising to visit when I could. They'd hug me, Grace's arms lingering, and slip me 20s they couldn't spare. "You're carrying our grandson," Michael said once, his voice thick. "Your family now." Their love was a light in the dark, but it couldn't fix the hole my own family had left. Work was my escape, but it came with its own battles. At the Night Owl, a customer named Carl, a burly man with a trucker's cap, started showing up too often, always at my tables. One night he slipped a note with his tip. "You're too pretty to be alone." I brushed it off, but Barb pulled me aside. "Watch him," she warned. "He's trouble." Then came the lawsuit. Carl claimed I'd served him contaminated food, landing him in the hospital. It was a lie. I'd never even waited on him that day, but his lawyer sent a letter threatening to sue the diner and me personally. Barb fought it, but the stress was a vice around my chest. If I lost my job, I'd have nothing. I started double-checking every order, paranoid I'd make a mistake, my hands shaking as I poured coffee. Carl's smirk across the counter told me he knew he'd gotten under my skin. Rachel, a waitress at the diner, saw me unraveling. She was 26, a single mom with a 5-year-old named Lily, and had a no-nonsense warmth that reminded me of Liam's mom. One day, during a slow shift, she caught me crying in the break room, my apron balled in my fists. "You're not living in that car, are you?" she asked, her eyes sharp. I nodded, too tired to lie. She didn't hesitate. "I've got a garage apartment. It's small, but it's yours if you want it." I tried to refuse, ashamed, but she cut me off. "Don't argue. Lily and I could use the company." Moving into her apartment was like stepping out of a storm. It was a tiny space, with a fold-out couch and a leaky skylight, but it was a roof, a place to breathe. Rachel and Lily became my makeshift family, Lily's giggles a balm for my battered heart. But it wasn't permanent. Rachel's landlord was strict, and I knew I was on borrowed time. Noah arrived in January, 8 weeks early, after a labor that felt like it would tear me apart. I was alone in the delivery room, gripping the rails of the bed, screaming for Liam, for anyone. When they placed Noah on my chest, 4 pounds 9 ounces, with Liam's green eyes and a shock of dark hair, I sobbed with love and fear. He was so small, hooked to monitors in the NICU, but he fought, his tiny fists clenched like he knew we had a battle ahead. Grace and Michael were there, snapping photos, their faces wet with tears. But 2 weeks later, they dropped a bomb. Michael had been offered a job in Colorado, a chance to escape their crushing medical debts. "We'll visit," Grace promised, holding Noah like she'd never let go. "He's our piece of Liam." When they left, the silence was deafening. It was just me and Noah, against a world that felt rigged to break us. Postpartum depression hit like a freight train. I loved Noah fiercely, but some days I couldn't get off Rachel's couch, his cries slicing through me like glass. I'd stare at the emerald ring, now on a chain around my neck, and beg Liam for strength. The hospital bills didn't help, $50,000 0 cents for Noah's NICU stay, with collectors calling daily, their voices cold and relentless. "Miss Harper, we need payment. Now," one said, as if I could pull thousands from thin air. I worked doubles at the diner, my body aching, but it barely covered diapers and formula. Rachel helped when she could, slipping me groceries, but she was stretched thin herself. I felt like I was failing Noah, failing Liam, failing the girl I'd been before the world turned cruel. In a moment of desperate hope, I mailed a birth announcement to my parents. I included a photo of Noah, his eyes so like Liam's, wrapped in a blanket Grace had knitted. On the back, I wrote, "Your grandson, Noah Liam Harper, born January 8th. I waited weeks, checking Rachel's mailbox obsessively, but nothing came. Finally, I drove to my parents' house, Noah bundled in my arms, my heart pounding. It was a Sunday, the craftsman glowing with warmth, the life I'd been ripped from. Dad answered, his face grayer, harder. "We have nothing to say," he said, his eyes sliding past Noah like he was nothing. The door slammed, and I stood there, tears freezing on my cheeks. I saw Mom's shadow in the window, but she didn't open it. Nathan's car pulled in as I walked away. Our eyes met, and for a second I thought he'd speak. Instead, he brushed past, his silence a fresh wound. The final straw came in April. Rachel's landlord found out I was living in the garage apartment and slapped her with an eviction notice. "I'm sorry, Em," she said, tears in her eyes. "He's giving us 30 days. That same week, Noah spiked 104-degree fever, his cries weak and listless. I gave him Tylenol, praying it would break, but it didn't. I packed him into my car, a junker I'd bought after the flood, and headed for the ER. Halfway there, a tow truck blocked me in at a gas station. "Repossessed," the driver said, hooking my car. I begged, Noah burning in my arms, but he wouldn't budge. I was stranded, my baby dying, and I broke. I sat on the curb, sobbing, until a familiar voice cut through. "Emily?" It was Mrs. Elena Martinez, my high school Spanish teacher, her face etched with concern. She'd been buying gas, her car idling near. "My son's sick," I choked out. "I need to get to the hospital." She didn't ask questions, just bundled us into her SUV and sped to the ER. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed Noah with a respiratory infection that had nearly turned septic. "Another hour and we might have lost him," the doctor said, his words a punch to my gut. Elena stayed holding my hand as they hooked Noah to IVs. Over coffee in the waiting room, I spilled everything. Liam's death, my family's rejection, the car, the eviction. She listened, her eyes kind but fierce. "You're not alone anymore," she said. "I have an attic apartment. It's yours, and I won't hear no." I tried to protest, but she cut me off. "You're going to finish what you started, Emily. Nursing school. Liam would want that." Her words lit a spark I thought had died. I moved into her attic, a cozy space with slanted ceilings and a window overlooking her garden. Elena watched Noah while I worked, her presence a rock I hadn't known I needed. But the world wasn't done testing me. At the diner, a co-worker named Tammy started spreading rumors, whispering to customers that I was a teen mom with a shady past. Her snide comments made shifts unbearable, and I feared Barb would fire me to avoid drama. Then came the hack. Someone stole my identity, likely from my lost wallet after the mugging, draining my bank account and racking up charges. My tuition payment bounced, and the nursing program threatened to drop me. I spent hours on the phone, fighting tears, while Elena co-signed a loan to keep me enrolled. "You're not quitting," she said, her voice steel. I pushed through, studying at night, rocking Noah to sleep, my dreams of nursing keeping me sane. A year later, a letter arrived from a law firm. Liam had taken out a $30,000 0-cents life insurance policy during a brief remission, naming me and Noah as beneficiaries. His cancer trial had also entitled Noah to a trust fund for education, a gift from the boy who'd loved us beyond death. I cried for days, touching the emerald ring, whispering thanks to Liam. With the money, I focused on school, working fewer shifts. I graduated nursing school with honors, my cap and gown a victory over every night I'd slept in my car. Seattle Children's Hospital hired me as a pediatric nurse, and I bought a modest condo in Capitol Hill, its bay windows letting in light I hadn't felt in years. Noah, now 4, strummed Liam's old guitar, his tiny fingers finding melodies that broke my heart. He was Liam's legacy, my miracle. Life wasn't easy, but it was ours. I'd worked long shifts, saving for Noah's future, while Elena, now Abuela Elena to Noah, kept us grounded. Then, a decade later, a $5 million 0-cent settlement arrived. The drug from Liam's trial had saved thousands, and the pharmaceutical company compensated families of participants. I founded the Liam Carter Hope Foundation, building a housing complex near the hospital for families of kids with cancer. The opening was a triumph, with Noah cutting the ribbon, his green eyes shining. Local news covered it, and 3 days later, an email landed in my inbox. It was Nathan. "I saw you on TV," he wrote. "Dad had a heart attack last year. Mom and Dad want to meet Noah. Please, M." My heart stopped. Why now? After 15 years of silence, what had changed? Nathan mentioned a scrapbook Mom kept, clippings of my nursing graduation, my foundation's work. What else was she hiding? And Dad's heart attack? Had it really softened the man who'd disowned me? I stared at Noah, now 14, his resemblance to Liam so striking it hurt. He'd been accepted to Berkeley's Young Artist program, a prodigy carrying his father's musical soul. What would he think of this family he'd never known? I agreed to a reunion, but with boundaries. I wasn't that scared girl anymore. I was Emily Harper, chief nursing officer, mother, survivor. The day they arrived, I paced my condo, rearranging vases, checking the oven where a lasagna baked. Noah watched, amused. "Mom, we're enough," he said, his voice wise beyond his years. At noon, their car pulled into my driveway. Dad stepped out, frail, leaning on a cane. Mom's hair was gray, her eyes hesitant. Nathan looked older, nervous. I opened the door, and we stared across a chasm of years. "Emily," Mom whispered, tears falling, "you're beautiful." I stepped aside, letting them in, my heart guarded but open. Noah entered, and the room froze. He was Liam's mirror. Same jawline, same green eyes, same quiet strength. Dad's cane trembled. Mom gasped. Nathan paled. "I'm Noah Harper," he said, offering his hand. "Nice to meet you." Dad took it, his voice breaking. "I'm David, your grandfather." Mom hugged him, sobbing, and Noah looked to me, unsure. I nodded, letting him choose. He played a guitar piece he'd written, Legacy, its notes weaving our story. Loss, love, survival. I told them everything. Liam's cancer, our choice, their betrayal. Dad's face crumpled. Mom clutched a handkerchief. Nathan admitted his betrayal with my phone. "We didn't know," Dad said, his voice a whisper. "We wouldn't listen." The sound at the door startled us. A courier dropped a package, documents from the law firm. "Urgent," the note read. I opened it, my hands shaking. It was about Liam's trial, a hidden clause suggesting misconduct in the drug's approval. If true, it could unravel the settlement, the foundation, everything. I tucked it away, my mind racing. What had Liam been part of? And what did my family know? Mom's scrapbook, Dad's regret, Nathan's guilt. Were they hiding something bigger? As Noah showed them photos, narrating our life, I stepped into the kitchen, touching the emerald ring. "We're okay, Liam," I whispered. The sound of Noah's laughter, Dad's awe, Mom's questions filled the air. A family, broken but mending. The package loomed in my mind, a shadow over this fragile hope. But I'd faced worse. I'd built a life from ashes, and I'd faced this too. Noah's music, Liam's love, my strength, they were enough. For now, I'd let this moment breathe, let healing begin, knowing the fight was far from over.